On today's Locked On Bucks, we preview a pivotal matchup with the Toronto Raptors. Can the Bucks avoid the trap? We dig into it and the latest rumors on Jimmy Butler next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for subscribing to the Locked On Bucks newsletter. If you have not yet, you can still subscribe for free at lockedondaily.com and get your day started with the all-new and free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Toronto Raptors come to town tonight, Camille, and it's a Raptors team that has given the Bucks some interesting moments through the past couple of years, but this iteration specifically of the Raptors, you saw the back-to-back wins against to start the homestand, I should say, and you thought, okay, chance at a really great homestand that you just beat the Kings and Magic on back-to-back nights. You got the Raptors coming to town, so that's clearly going to be a 3-game win streak. But not so fast. It's the same Raptors that just beat the full-strength Boston Celtics by 13 points the same night the Bucks were dusting off the Orlando Magic. So how much concern is there for a potential trap game? And I say that knowing the trap being 2 tough games of back-to-back, Raptors sandwich in between that matchup with the 76ers. But in fairness, we don't even know who the 76ers team is. They're still flirting with 10 games below 500, and it's night 2 of a back-to-back. So who knows if you see Joel Embiid and Paul George in that one.
I think you have to always have a certain level of respect for your opponents, regardless of what their record is, as we just saw this week with the Raptors beating the Celtics by 13, coming off a victory against the Warriors at home as well. So the Raptors are coming into Milwaukee, having won 2 straight games, which might not sound like a lot, but when you only have 10 wins the entire season, listen, when you only have 10 wins the entire season and 2 of them just came back to back, like, you are going to feel a certain way about it for sure. So it goes to show that on any night an NBA team can come out perform, any night an NBA team can win a game. You have to make sure that you're taking care of business. And we have seen games throughout this season where it seemed like the Bucks were playing with their food, in the sense that they came in the game, they didn't have the proper pace on offense. They're walking into plays casually. On defense, they're not really putting that effort in to really scramble to take away open shots from guys. They're just letting guys get what they want. They're going to watch the ball, hope that it misses, then go and start their offense that way. And the Bucks can't come into the game casual. They can't come in the game like a little chill guy. Like, they got to go out there and they really got to hoop. And just because it's the Raptors, like, that doesn't take away what you need to do. Like, you take care of business, you can have another 4th quarter off. Like, look at it that way. Just take care of business early, try to get that lead up. Let's have it feel a little bit like the Mike Budenholzer days, the early days, you know, when you get up really big on the opponent, you get to sit the 4th quarter and let some other guys get some tick.
You know, all those things are valid and true for how you have to approach this game tonight. And I haven't had a chance to watch that game between the Raptors and Celtics yet. I have no idea how the Raptors did what they did. Like, that's one of the more fascinating games because they only made 11 threes. So this wasn't you get hot from 3 and that's how you beat your opponent. The Celtics made more threes. And it wasn't hey, Celtics hit 20 plus threes, but 11 to 16 was the 3-point difference. Offensive rebounds, so your second chances there, identical, 13 for each team, 11 points off of those for each team. The Raptors had more turnovers than the Celtics in the game. Up and down the list, you just look at, all right, things were basically even, or the Celtics won the category, and the only area is one that should be a massive advantage for the Bucks, and that was points in the paint. So the Raptors won on the glass, and they scored in the painted area, which if you're the Bucks and you look at this and you say, great. That's how we want to play too. So it has the makings of, look, as long as this doesn't become an outlier 3-point shooting game, you should win this. And then things can really start to fall into place for this team. As we sit right now, 22-17. They're 5 games above 500 for the first time this season.
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, or in one way, you look at it and you say, really, the first time? But then you're reminded, yeah, the Bucks didn't get above 500 until the final day of November this season. So a chance to keep it rolling here. And we looked at this pocket specifically and said, there could be some challenges. Like, we've made a lot of mention about what happens once you get into February and that schedule really picks up, and kind of circled this week and said, okay, not as difficult as once you get into Feb, but there's some challenges on this one. With the back-to-back, the way the Kings were playing, the Magic are always going to give you a tough game, at least we thought. And who knows, maybe Philly's going to be healthy by then and starting to figure things out. Everything has started to break your way, and you've won these games. So if they can close out the month very strong, this gives a lot of, I don't want to say hope, but that's a strong springboard going into what is going to be an incredibly challenging, not just month of February, final, 35 games of the season.
Yeah, like last month and a half of the season for the Bucks is going to be a tough one. And look, every game matters. And especially right now, as you are looking at the standings in the East and seeing where things are jockeying out, because the Bucks have shown so far this season that when it comes to the Cavs, the Celtics, and the Knicks, they have a little struggle beating them. Now, you can go the Damian Lillard route of it and say, like, well, look how they lost those games. Do you really have any concerns against the Bucks matching up with any of those 3 teams? I wouldn't. Listen, if anyone pointed to the Knicks, like, y'all just got smoked in those 2 games, like, don't put them, like, I get it. But yet, like, the Bucks are 22-17. The Knicks are 27-15. So the Knicks have just played more games than the Bucks at this point.
Which is not a good thing,
right,
for an old team.
Right. And they're up 2 in the loss column there. So it's like the 3rd seed feels like it could be attainable, but it's going to be difficult to kind of break into there. So what the Bucks have to continue to make sure that they're able to do is at least hold on to that 4 spot, stay in that area there, continue to beat those teams that are below them in the standings at the very least. And we mentioned the Raptors, 10 wins. Like, you've already beaten the Raptors this season. We've seen when the Bucks, go likes to get into point of what it means. So they have to continue to take care of business, especially during this homestand. Just win your games at home. Like, that's always the formula. Try to win as many games at home as you can. If you can split on the road, you did all right, as long as you can have a really good win percentage at home. So the Bucks have to continue to build those habits as well. And don't fall into the trap. It's a Friday night. Play your game, do what you need to do against Toronto, and then get ready for Philly, a Philly team that I don't know what exactly is going on with Philly. I know the Locked On Sixers host have floated the idea out. Maybe it's time to just rest Embiid. Like, maybe just sit him. Like, if this is the schedule that they're going to be getting in Philly with Embiid's health, maybe it's at the point now where you just call it one on him. So Bucks have to keep playing for it, and they got to take it one game at a time. Don't overlook an opponent like Toronto just because what their record shows. Continue to play ball.
I do want to touch a little bit on Philly, because we're not going to have a show between now and when that game is played, and the rest of the month, and what should be, I don't want to say the target, but what you would lean towards of, hey, if we can do this, we feel pretty good as we start to get into the month. And again, the most important thing is going to be just continue to play well into March and April, but you also want to build up a little nest egg there too, to give yourself a nice safety net in case you go through some more of those rough stretches with the schedule that's in front of you. So we'll take a look at all that coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. Well, this next segment here of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by our friends at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. So in just looking at what the Bucks have left on their schedule here in this month of January, when January concludes, we said you got 35 games from February until the end of the regular season, and 32 of them are against teams that are either in the top 10 or figure and hope to be a playoff team. To me, 27-20. Like, if you can sit there going into February with the games that you have left, they're currently 22-17. So 27-20 to me that's the floor. Do that. Anything better, sure, that's going to be fantastic. But if you're 27-20, it at least feels like, okay, starting to build this up even more. And I mean, if the wheels fall off and you go like 14-21, you're a 500 team. Obviously not what we're hoping for, but start to push that number to 10 above 500. I'd love it if it was 10, but that's going to require a lot of work. And you've still got the Clippers on the road, who have been playing pretty tough. And the way they play is going to present challenges for the Bucks with their length and defense, and the home court advantage that they have out there at the Intuit Dome. Then you have 3 additional road games against Western Conference teams. At this point, you absolutely have to beat the Jazz and Blazers, even though that is a back-to-back, especially considering the Blazers beat you at home. Those 2 games, for what we just mentioned, with those 35 left on the schedule once you get into February, those 2 are absolute must-win games. So I say 27-20, and now even I'm starting to say 28-19 maybe, because the reality is, with some of the games that you've let slip away, you're going to have to steal games that you would ordinarily say, I don't know if we'll win that. So whether that's in Los Angeles or in Inglewood against the Clippers or in San Antonio against the Spurs, you're going to have to win one or a handful of those games from here on out.
They are. Excuse me. They are. They truly are. And when you look at that West Coast trips for the Bucks last year did not go super well for them. So that's something they're going to have to correct this year. I remember Doc mentioning that after last season, like, he was going to be evaluating everything when it came to the processes of this team, of like, even when they go on the road trips and how that goes, because their flow was just different last year. They're going to have to show that they have fixed that problem to a certain degree and try to get some of those wins while they're on the road too, because as you mentioned, after this homestand here, they're heading on to the road. Like, you have Toronto at home today, you have Philly at home on Sunday, then you head to New Orleans, you come back home very shortly for the rivalry week game against the Heat before you head back on the road for that West Coast trip where you're playing the Clippers, the Jazz, the Blazers, and the Spurs to wrap up the month of January. Then you come back home and then you continue on that way. But to finish out January, knowing that they're going to have a road heavy finish, again, it makes these games at home even more important. Take care of business at home. Use that energy and fuel that you get from that home crowd and help that to focus you a little bit more as well. And even with the opponents that are coming up, like as we just mentioned, the Raptors just beat the Celtics, who are going through their own things. And I think it's worth just reminding and mentioning, seasons are long. You go through seasons, you're going to have some ups and you're going to have some downs, and it's really about how you navigate your way out of them. And although this Bucks season has been very up and down, I think it does show a lot about the character of this team and the makeup of this team, of like, we're not losing sight. Like, we understand what we have together when we actually play the game right. You hear Doc mention it all the time. Like, they know what it looks like when they're playing the game right. sometimes they just fall into these habits where they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if those moments can continue to decrease of like, what are you guys doing? Like, you know what you need to be doing, and have that continually be ingrained into their head of how they need to be playing. And then seeing the results always help when it's like, we played right. We got the win. It felt good. Everybody's feeling good. You continue to build on that. And that's my biggest hope with this current homestand that they're on. It's like, just continue to build from that, because the competition is going to heat up, is going to get more challenging. And we all know as well, as the season continues to get towards that finish line, teams that are still playing for something, that comp level continues to go up, because now it's not a random Tuesday in December. Like, we're looking at March, and we're looking to that playoff push where teams are trying to build momentum. So continue to rack up wins here in this point of the season, where for some it's like the doldrums of like, we've been doing this over and over and over. Like, get these wins. Excellence requires like that patience, that attention to detail, and this Bucks team has to continue to show that they can do that and play at a high level.
Yeah, and I take back what I said. 28-19 is the baseline.
There you go.
Just looking at the schedule again, because the reality is this, and I agree, like, it's a dangerous game to count wins before you get there and to overlook your opponents. But as we mentioned, some of the games that the Bucks let get away earlier this season, and by earlier, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, some of those games that they've let get away, the 2-8 start, that, you know, the hole that you put yourself in because of that, your record against the Knicks, the Celtics, and the Cavs. With all of that in mind, there are 6 games left on the schedule, to me, that are non-negotiables. You absolutely have to win those games. 3 of them are in this month. Next week in New Orleans, I know the Pelicans just had a nice win, and they started to look like, hey, maybe they're starting to piece things together, and Zion's back, and they're obviously not going to hit the ceiling you had for him before the season, but they might be a tough draw. That game is an absolute must-win because of where New Orleans is in the standings and the inconsistencies that they've had all season long. The games we mentioned, it's a back-to-back, but the games in Utah and Portland, absolute must-wins for 2 teams that is, especially as you start to get towards February and the back half of the season, they have no interest in winning games. So those are must-wins. 1 game left against the Hornets, and that is your first week of February. That is an absolute must-win game. And then you have the Wizards on your schedule once more just after the All-Star break. That's on the road. And 1 final game with the Pelicans at home in April. Like, those 6 games, it's non-negotiable, Camille. Like, those are games you absolutely have to win.
Take care of business. That's what we've been saying this episode. Like, they just have to take care of business. And with that taking care of business aspect of it, for this Bucks team as well, they have things that they need to continue to work on and grow in. Like, there's been so much conversation around the Chris Middleton coming off the bench and what that means and his recovery from his injury. And during this stretch as well, it's important for Chris to, consistently be able to get his minutes. Hopefully that the ankles respond well to the minute workload that he's getting. I will be keeping an eye on that as well during this stretch while they're playing some teams that don't have the best records. It's like, how can you really manipulate those minutes with Chris? And what is his recovery period looking like during this time as well? It feels like Dame and Giannis are getting back into their flow of things after they missed a few games after the NBA Cup final, with their illnesses and various little knick-knack injuries that they had as well. Their conditioning seems to be back. Like, the touch with Giannis seems to be back, although he is dealing with the little hand injury as well. But it seems like they're getting into a better flow. So I love to see that. Want to continue to see Chris Middleton getting back into the flow of things, seeing his minutes, and hopefully that can ramp up a little bit as time continues to go on. It looks like tonight's game against the Raptors, Andre Jackson Jr. is questionable in this game, but Gary Trent Jr. looks like he's probable, so he should be back in the lineup. So for the Bucks as well, of like, hey, look, win these games for sure. That's the ultimate goal. Win the games. But in the process of winning those games, I'm hoping to continue to see like the chemistry between the team continue to improve. Gary Trent Jr. getting back into the lineup. I'm not sure if he's going to have any rust himself after missing a few games. I would assume so, just to get back into the rhythm for him as well. So using this time as well, get the wins for sure, but continue to build your internal chemistry, continue to get back into conditioning shape, and be ready to run and sprint, because what's coming up after we get out of this month of January, heading into All-Star break, and after All-Star break, there's going to be a lot on the table for this team, and they're not going to have too much time to warm up at that point.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the show notes, are the Bucks starting to get full strength and get a runway there? But then the Andre Jackson news comes and leaving the game against the Magic the other night. So we'll monitor that. I would imagine Chris Middleton continues to come off the bench, and I think it's, assuming Ajax does not play tonight, I think it opens the door for something that a few of us have not necessarily called for, but pondered. Hey, how would things look if this was the look that the Bucks had in their starting five? So we'll explain what that is. And I mentioned at the start of the show, the rumors that won't go away. So we'll get into the latest on the Jimmy Butler saga and start to wrap things up after this on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you now about Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. Heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try, and let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, fits, comfort, or just finding the right style for me, and Skims has changed all of that. Their men's line offers someone for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic boxers or briefs, all designed with a perfect balance of comfort and style. I tried the Skims boxer brief, I should say, and I'm hooked. These are the perfect for my active lifestyle. They move with me. They never lose their shape. They stay in place all day, whether I'm working out or just running errands. They're the most comfortable and reliable underwear I have ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing, almost like you're wearing nothing at all. So get started now. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com/lockedonnba and Skims stores. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show from the drop-down menu that follows. Skims.com/lockedonnba and let them know we sent you. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets when you win that first bet. FanDuel.com to get in on the action. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, Camille. What do you think we see? So I'm assuming, do you feel that Andre Jackson isn't going to play tonight either?
Yeah, I think hip injury is no reason to rush him through an injury. Like, if he needs some time to heal, let him heal.
And I don't want to get into the relitigating the starters. Like Frank and I did it on one of the more recent shows. It may have come across as negative. It's not. It's mostly pointed out, look, here's how you can optimize this group. Because right now, for the entire season, the Bucks are once again knocking on the door at being in the top 10 in all three of those categories. They are 13th in offense. They are 8th in defense. And I think they're 11th or 12th in net rating. If we, have fun with the numbers and go back to, if we have let's take a look at since the 2-8 start, the offense is still basically where it is. I mean, you're about a half a point per 100 possessions better. They're 12th in offense, 5th in defense, and net rating, they are 7th. So this is really the group that we've seen, and the number that stands out the most is the offensive rating. So that's where the conversation is coming from of, look, how do you make that offense better? Maybe it's just maximizing the minutes with AJ Green. So I'm very curious to see if it is, in fact, AJ Green that gets the start tonight. I would assume it is. Like, I think they've, Doc has kind of talked about this too. I think they like where they're at with Gary Trent Jr. and his role coming off the bench, and he's found something there. So maybe we'll get a look at that tonight with this Bucks optimized and fully juiced offensive lineup.
Yeah. I would be surprised if it's Gary Trent Jr. coming off of injury as well. Like, normally you kind of ease guys into that. So if it's not AJ Green tonight, I'd be surprised.
Well, one other way to optimize the lineup, Camille, that some may argue is adding a guy that can score in the half court and has a reputation of being a late moment guy and a playoff guy. And that is, of course, our friend Jimmy Butler. So I know you just did something for some other Lockdown channels on this. Do you make anything of the, hey, Jimmy Butler, for what it's worth, has not ruled the Bucks out reports?
So I like to put biases out front so people understand where I'm coming from, right? I'm a Marquette alum. I was actually at Marquette when Jimmy Butler was there. I cheered for Jimmy when he got drafted. I'm a fan of Jimmy Butler. I say that to say I do not think that is the move that the Bucks should make if, this happens, if it's on the table. But I appreciate the fact that John Horst is doing his job. He's on the phone. He's making the phone calls. He's trying to figure out what it would look like, evaluating if it would help the team. That's what GMs are supposed to do. So I'm not surprised to see that the Bucks are listed as one of those teams. It's what you're supposed to be doing. What did surprise me was seeing that initially it came out like Jimmy Butler said no to Memphis, no to Milwaukee. And then now it's like, well, Jimmy's actually not writing off Milwaukee, which what that says to me more than anything is that where he really wants to go, which is Phoenix, according to all reports, it's not looking like that's going to happen. So now he has to kind of pivot and try to find some other situations that he wouldn't mind playing in, at least as a rental for this year, probably maybe picking up that player option another year and a half. So like a quick rental for Jimmy Butler. So like, I think that there's something to it for sure. I'm not going to say like that's all fake. But what I will say on the other flip side of that is that I hope this Bucks team doesn't do it. I can understand why some would go the Jimmy Butler route, but you just read the numbers of where this team is. Like they're just outside the top 10 in almost every category, and they have not played consistent ball yet. It's like you can see the form, like the outline, like you can be a really good basketball team, but you have to make sure you're executing. You have to have the right rotations. You have to figure things out. If the Bucks made any move at the deadline, I don't think it needs to be as big as a Jimmy Butler, but rather just finding like an athletic big to insert into that rotation, finding a way. I think the most important thing, finding a way to get Ryan Rollins onto a standard contract is probably like my number one thing for this Bucks team heading into the trade deadline. Like Rollins has shown that he can play, and he is somebody who I think this Bucks team is going to lean on as like a backup guy, that 9th, 10th man in the rotation that they're going to need.
So just for the sake of transparency here, it's a complicated discussion for me whenever it comes down to personnel decisions, given I am paid by the team. So you always have to be careful about what you say. What I took as the Jimmy Butler, as the report that he hadn't ruled out the Bucks, was more so leverage in that, like, okay, if I end up there, fine. Like there's these guys, it's not my preferred destination, but I also know I can't just say no, and leave the only yes as the Phoenix Suns when there just doesn't seem to be any route to Phoenix. I mean, it's not just Miami. Miami doesn't want the Bradley Beal contract.
Don't blame them.
And, it's also humorous in that when we went through this saga, a year and a half ago with Damian Lillard, all of the discourse was Blazers fans saying like, look, I understand he's good. We don't want Tyler Hero because we've already got these other guys. We've already got, you drafted Scoot Henderson at the time. And Anthony Simons, like we don't need Tyler Hero. It's the exact same conversation in Miami. And granted, it's a worse contract, but we have Tyler Hero. We don't need Bradley Beal, and we don't want that contract. So I just don't see any scenario. It would have to be a 3-team or more trade. Then it becomes even more complicated because of the second apron. I just think part of this is I have to keep some options open to then drum up more interest and have other teams say, whoa, all right, if he said this, what about this offer? And then you can start to shop some other offers that you're getting. It would open the door there. I would not totally write it off and hate it, depending on what it costs to get you. But that's the other thing is everybody's going to point to the same handful of names. And we had this conversation all the time over the summer. Why does Miami want those players and contracts? And it's not to say, hey, these guys stink, but they're older. And look, everybody's going to say, well, trade Chris Middleton and trade Bobby Portis and trade Pat Connaughton for them. Number one, why does Miami want that? And secondly, you can say, well, it's, the contracts are shorter. Great. Contract is the same length as Jimmy Butler. What Miami wants is assets and or immediate cap relief where, hey, we're getting a young player in draft picks, or we're walking away from this money and we have cap room to spend in this offseason. There's no scenario where the Bucks can provide that. So in any world where Jimmy Butler ends up on the Bucks, it's again a 3 or 4 team trade that involves numerous teams. And Brian Windhorst always used to joke, if you got a 3-team trade, you don't have a trade. Especially now. I mean, I'm curious to see if that has changed. If it's even more difficult because of the CBA, or if the reality is everything is going to have to be 3 or 4 team trades because of the CBA and because this team's in the second apron and this team was hard capped at the first apron. But it's a mess. The offseason too, I've seen more of well, he can just do a sign and trade. Miami can do a sign and trade and move him elsewhere. In theory, yes. Possibly. But again, you're hard capped at the first apron. So you ain't doing a sign and trade to the Phoenix Suns. You're not doing a sign and trade to the Bucks in the summer. You're eliminating at least half of the league in sign and trades. So I honestly don't know what's going to happen with Jimmy Butler. And it's going to be very fascinating if those reports are still there of, the Bucks are still one of those teams he'd be interested in. The suspension is over as of today. And
Jimmy said, I want to hoop.
He's going to be in Milwaukee on next Thursday. So it figures, I don't know if I'd say uncomfortable like the Harden situation, but we do know Jimmy Butler has no problem being in uncomfortable situations.
He has not a problem in the world. He'll be smiling and hooping and acting like he is good to go. But I wonder if the Heat don't find an offer that they love, because as you mentioned, the Bradley Beal thinks I'm going to add too many dollars to their cap going forward. And I just wonder if they don't find anything that they don't like, if they're willing to be like, you know what? Fine. We'll keep you for the rest of this season. And assuming that he does what he threatened to do of not accepting his player option, which that's over $50 million right there. If he opted into that as well, I wouldn't be surprised. But if Jimmy is kept after the deadline, I do wonder if the Heat would hope that he just opts out of that player option. And if they'll just be like, you know what? We didn't get anything back in return for you, but we're going to take this cap space and just go for it and be fine with that. So I do wonder if that's also on the table, but I don't know if Jimmy's going to really turn down that player option, because I'm not sure if he'll get that amount of money.
You're not going to get that money, right? I mean, it's the Brooklyn Nets that are going to have cap space. And I mean, that's what complicates it. And one other thing to mention too, because I've seen it a lot and we see it popping up in the chat here too. Dame for Jimmy does not work straight up. Jimmy Butler is making more money than Damian Lillard. You can look at the first figure in that 48. Sure, they're both making $48+ million this year. Jimmy Butler is making more than Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard is at 48.7 million, 0.787. Jimmy Butler's at 48.798. And under the CBA, you cannot bring back more money when you're in the second apron. So that trade does not work for the Bucks. And a bunch of people have kicked it around too, of well, they make roughly the same. This would have to be the trade. No, it's not the trade. It doesn't work. And, it just, the Pat Connaughton, throw him in. If there's one thing I feel pretty confident in, it is that the Bucks are going to get under the second apron before this season. You're that close. You only need to shave about $5 million or so. You have to do it, because you don't do it, your 2032 pick is frozen. If you get under the second apron this summer, I'm not advocating to do it, but the assets that you have potentially are 3 players that are on relatively big expiring contracts, your 2031 first-round pick, and your 2032 first-round pick that you could pick swap. So in the summer, the Bucks have a lot more to play with. Granted, you would be gambling away all of your future on that. So it better be the move. And, look, it may be a tough business decision, but Pat Connaughton's played really well for you. And, this goes back to what we talked about last year and caught heat for, in that, look, I think part of this issue is you're asking him to do too much.
Yeah.
And it feels like that's what we've seen this year. He has been the break in case of emergency guy. When you've thrown him out there, he's been productive and he's played well for you. But last year, he was like your sixth or seventh man.
Yeah.
And you were saying, okay, play heavy minutes, take on the tough assignments. And that just doesn't work. So maybe it's him, because I do think they're going to do something to get under the second apron this year. And I think the two goals are get under the second apron by the end of the league year, do something with Ryan Rollins so it doesn't get into the summer where you're worrying about restricted free agency for him. So, yeah, I think the Bucks are going to do something, but I just don't think they have anything that Miami would be interested in terms of a Jimmy Butler trade.
Yeah, and it might just be a case of like, what is the best offer on the table? Like, the offers that are on the table might not all be great, where they look at what the Bucks could offer and be like, that is the best offer. But again, I'm hoping that's not the case. I don't want the Jimmy Butler experiments on this Milwaukee Bucks team, especially after seeing how long it kind of took for chemistry to develop here with Dame coming onto the team. Again, my goal heading into the trade deadline for the Bucks would be, one, finding out a way to get Ryan Rollins into that standard contract, which means moving somebody off the roster to be able to change his contract. And two, if possible, find a way to get an athletic big to kind of insert into the rotation. And anything else that happens outside of that, like, that's not my focus. Jimmy Butler is not the route that I want this team to go. So we'll see how it all shakes out going forward. But I think it's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on what the Heat are doing and how this all plays out, because I could see this Jimmy Butler thing going in a few different ways, as we've discussed.
I know we're already very late here, but the discourse in the chat has shifted to Zach LaVine. And again, I must ask, what assets do the Bucks have that the Bulls would take for Zach? Like, that's what you're up against.
It's always the first question.
Right. I mean, it's all right, fine. We'll take these contracts. We need draft picks. It's not even the first. Like, you're not trading your 2031 first round pick for Zach LaVine. That is not the move that you're making. You don't even have second round picks to trade. So that's the spot the Bucks are in. The Jimmy Butler one is only coming up because that is one that has the potential to get uncomfortable. And hearing Jimmy Butler say, look, I'm not signing with you. I'm leaving and I'll decline my player option. I'll do this and that to take away some of that leverage for the team. So that's more than anything why you have seen the link between the Bucks and the Heat. And even then, it's not a strong bond, but you've seen the mention. You don't have those things. So any of these marquee type of players or the Zach LaVines and higher contracts, like, it either has to be an albatross of a contract that you're taking on, or it's somebody else that, smaller lengths and smaller contract, I should say. So that's the spot that the Bucks are in here with the second apron and everything else. But as we maintain, look, you're in the second apron now. It's not that bleak in the future, especially if you can get out of the second apron this league year, and it's there for the taking. Needing to shave, $4.5 million, I believe it is, off of your current salary structure. I mean, we'll have more shows in the coming weeks, especially as we get close to the trade deadline and with Frank, to really, really iron that out. They are $4.1 million over the second apron level. So you'd have to shave $4.1 million to get under that figure. And just because they're names that everybody's going to mention, DeLon Wright is making just over $2 million. Marjon Beauchamp's making $2.7 million. Those, to me, Chris Livingston, too. I know he's my guy. I've advocated for him. He is on a standard contract, just under $2 million. Those, to me, are the names to keep an eye on because of that figure being the target is just over $4 million. Shave that to get under the second apron.
Keep an eye on it. Like that, the cap numbers, the gymnastics, that stuff is, I'm always like, I don't understand exactly how all these numbers work, but understanding those key numbers of how much over the second apron are the Bucks, what contracts will help get them under it, I think is very important to keep in mind going forward.
Well, that'll do it for today's show. I know we went pretty long, and look, we've already gone long. Let's sneak this one into Camille. yesterday the news of the passing of Bob Uecker,
Oh yeah.
who, for anybody in the Wisconsin state of Wisconsin, in the Milwaukee area specifically, of any age, it's not even if you're in your 30s or 40s, like everybody knew who Bob
Generations.
Uecker. Everybody knew who Bob Uecker was. I did a radio interview in DC yesterday where they asked me, "What are your thoughts on Bob Uecker?" And I mean, he was so transcendent that when you're born in Wisconsin, as we were, and raised here,
Mhm.
there are two things that are non-negotiable. You have an unwavering support for the Green Bay Packers, and Bob Uecker isn't far behind. Like, everybody knows who Bob Uecker was. Your mom, your aunt, your sisters, they all know who he was. And he just had that type of impact. And you think about everything he did prior, Mr. Belvedere, Major League, the
Major
Miller
League.
Lite ads and everything else. Like, he had talked about getting offers from other teams. I think the Yankees were one of them that wanted to pull him out of Milwaukee. If Bob Uecker came along now with that personality and how dynamic he was with all of the platforms and outlets there are, who knows, maybe he's not the longtime Brewers announcer, but thank God that wasn't the case.
He is someone, as you said, he transcends even baseball. Like, he is just Wisconsin. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a huge baseball fan. I rock with the Brewers. I'm a cheer for the Brewers, but it's not a sport that I generally enjoy watching in my free time unless I'm there in person. And yet, like, I still had a connection to Uecker. It felt like losing like a grandfather, like a relative, someone who would guide you through understanding the game with that personality that he had. Even watching like Major League and the laughs that he had, the personality, the fact that he was able to develop relationships with Brewers of so many different generations, fans, even my mom, who has no real big sports interest. She tries because I do this stuff now, but even she was like, "Did you hear about Bob Uecker? I can't believe it." And the last thing I'll say, I think that when you lose someone, even if there's someone who you don't necessarily know, but they had an impact in your life, you always going to feel that. Like, that's why athletes and artists and commentators and people who you've heard and had in your life for years, when you lose them, it hurts like you really knew them. And I think that the way that the city, the state has been showing up, I love seeing all the people heading to a statue down at the park, putting out the Millers, putting out some flowers, Brewers, caps, bats, whatever they have. And then seeing the community around that of people just still standing there and talking to complete strangers about how much they love you. Like, again, it goes to show what that legacy was. It's about the unity that he helped to create in this city, in this state, of just that love for that team and love for him. So best wishes to his family, his friends, to everyone who's listened to that voice, call those Brewers game, that voice, that personality, that man who has been a crucial part of so many Wisconsinites' lives. So just sad news to see that he's passed away, but a life well lived, a life that impacted so many other people. So sending out love to everyone who's feeling that loss.
90 years old and still doing it,
Yeah.
Think about everybody in your life that starts to reach that age. You're like, maybe you shouldn't be driving anymore. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this anymore. And here he was still calling baseball games. And your point too about the people that have impacted you, but just by growing up watching them or listening to them, like it was a tough day, I think, for a lot of Bucks fans and all Wisconsinites yesterday with the passing of Bob Uecker. And I don't know, Camille, for me, the Mount Rushmore, the guys that when they do pass, it is going to be like, oh man, this is really tough, would be Bob Weir, Eddie Vedder, Charles Barkley, and I don't know if there's a fourth, but that's it. Stone Cold Steve Austin would probably be the fourth. They're like, man, I
feel
can't believe they're gone. Yeah.
I feel it though.
We'll see. As we get closer to the game, I'm going to keep the door open on this. We didn't touch all too much on the 76ers. There's always a lot of intrigue with Philly for the obvious reasons. If this is Philly playing their guys Saturday night, a night one of a back-to-back, and again, who knows, because it's an actual injury now with Joel Embiid. But if they opt to play their guys night one and night two is you're getting the guys that everybody's always seen. Gerson Yabusele is starting and Reggie Jackson's starting. There's no mention of the game. But if this is shaping up to be, hey, Joel thinks he's going to play and Paul George is going to play, maybe we'll leave the door open for maybe you'll get a bonus show on Sunday to talk about that Bucks and Sixers matchup. But that will do it for today's show. look, leave your thoughts on the Jimmy Butler rumors. I think we know what the overwhelming opinion is, but leave your thoughts in the comments here for this show so we can see what the prevailing thought is on those rumors. That'll do it for today's show, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you guys once again next week on Locked On Bucks.